Run mute.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order of the Environmental Committee of the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, August 5th, 2026. Let's see here. Roll call, please. Thanks.
Ryan Lardier,
Here.
Mike Duffy,
Here.
Nikki Frank, here, and Parvin Star.
Yes.
All righty. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No.
Terrific. Is it your response that matters, Chris? Does anyone else? I don't know what the protocol is. Can anyone else change the agenda?
I think Jason could, but it's mostly Trish's meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I don't know.
So that's sufficient. I just want to follow protocol. Oral communications. Do we have any oral communications from the public for items not on the agenda?
There's nobody online.
Seeing none, we'll proceed to new business. Members of the public can address each scheduled item. Let's see here. We have 2026 property management goals overview.
Yeah. So I'll be taking that, and then Scott, if you can pull up that map whenever you get a chance. But yeah, so at our last meeting, it was asked of me that we kind of provide a overview of the district's properties, our management goals for them, and what we kind of use them for. So I will just start with kind of a brief overview of, what we're doing in terms of land management and the lands that we do own. So generally, our department, the environmental department, is tasked with watershed management, among other things. The primary goal of this task is protection and enhancement of ecosystem health and water quality while providing a reliable water supply in perpetuity. So essentially just protecting our water sources and our environment. The district owns about 2,300 acres of land, and most of that land is spread across 4 main properties that you can see on the screen here. And I will just kind of walk through each property in particular and just tell you a little bit about. So first up, we have the Big Red property. And if you can scroll down to the next map, Scott, I have a little zoom in of that property. So this is our Ben Lomond Mountain watershed property. This one is about 1,600 acres. And this is some of our, I'd say, primo water sources in terms of surface water. So we collect water from creeks here, including Peavine, Silver, Foreman, Molosky, Clear, and Sweetwater. Some of these sources we don't collect from anymore. They are like historic, but we still have the water rights. And some of them we don't collect from currently because our infrastructure is still destroyed, but we're planning on rebuilding them, such as Peavine, Sweetwater, Clear. Yeah. And so I'll also point out that we have the kind of shaded boxes are Semper Virens owns the timber rights to that property. And so essentially we cannot do a timber harvest on that area. We don't, have plans to do that, but that's just something interesting worth noting. And in terms of our management goals for this property, first off, we want to reestablish our water sources because, as I mentioned, almost all of our water sources were lost during the fire. We currently have Foreman Creek back online, which provides a big chunk of our water, but all of the other creeks are not back online yet. So that's a huge priority for us. And to that end, the environmental department is moving forward with the first stages for 5 Mile, removing the hazard trees. And that's the first step that's needed before we can do a survey and then rebuild it. And for Peavine, we removed the hazard trees. We have a plan for how we're going to rebuild it. We just need to rebuild the water pipeline now and the intake. So that's really the first key goal, is reestablishing those water sources. But then the second part is kind of protecting those water sources and infrastructure in the future. Because as I mentioned, this all burned in the fire. And due to kind of the cost of rebuilding things, we're just going to be rebuilding it in the same manner. So it will be vulnerable to fire again. And so trying to devise a way to kind of protect both the pipeline as well as our water treatment plant, which also resides on this property. Um, and so to that end, we are implementing a shaded fuel break on a section of this 5 mile pipeline. And the goal of that is it will protect the pipeline once it's rebuilt. It will protect the treatment plant, but also it will protect the town of Boulder Creek and the community. So we're really excited about that project. Other management goals, general vegetation and fuels management. This property is very steep and very heavily forested. So, and seeing as the fire wiped out basically all of it, there's heavy fuel loading, especially with dead trees that are down and things like that. And we don't have great access or opportunities to actually manage for that in a lot of these areas. So that's one challenge for us, is trying to manage the fuel loading in areas that we don't have access to and that are, heavily forested, steep. Other concerns, we want to, this honestly goes for all of our properties, manage trespass. But seeing as this is such a huge property, it's quite hard to manage trespass. We have, probably 5 different access roads that access this property. And so that's a lot of different gates and places that people could enter the property. We've had a few scenarios in recent years of people, getting lost in the mountains and being found on our properties eventually. So I think just having a general understanding of where trespass is happening, being proactive in preventing it, and generally knowing where the trails are and having eyes on that in case something does happen. And I think that's kind of the main pieces I'll touch on for that one. The next property I'll touch on is our Felton Empire Grade watershed property. And if you, I think, scroll up, if you will, Scott. GIS was acting up, so I don't have individualized map for all of these, but
GIS makes one of that.
Well, I'll just talk through this one and then Scott will get that up shortly. But this Felton Empire Grade watershed property is unsurprisingly in Felton. It runs along Empire Grade. It's approximately 250 acres. And our water sources there are Bennett Creek and Bull Creek. And those are kind of spring-fed creeks. And we also very nearby have our Bull Creek intake, although it's not on the same property. This property is generally steep, rugged, and heavily forested. There are old lime kilns and quarries and logging roads. And Bull and Bennett Creek provide a good amount of water for us, and those are currently online. They were knocked off from the flood and the fire, but we've gotten those back online and we currently use them. Our goals for management of this property are to, again, protect our water sources and the infrastructure. These are springs and creeks. And so just making sure that we're keeping our watershed clean. We want to, again, maintain the defensible space around our infrastructure. Some of this pipeline did burn up in the fire. Some of it did burn up or get damaged in the flood. And so trying to protect from those natural disasters, managing trespass. And then another one that I didn't mention for the other property is managing access roads. So especially with the wet winters that we have up here and the steep properties, maintaining roads is really important, because if you don't, they will just walk out. And so making sure that we're doing best practices in terms of putting water bars on the road to prevent, erosion from happening, and just making sure that we're staying on top of it, keeping them clear of vegetation, everything along those lines. Next up,
Does not like this page.
yeah. Next up, we have the Olympia watershed property. You scroll down. So Olympia is 180 acres, and we have wells on this property. Olympia wells number 2 and 3. This is our only property that's open to the public. And so it's open to hikers, horses, dogs on leash. That's generally the extent of what we see out there. We do also see some mountain bikers out there. They are not supposed to be out there. So that's something that we actively manage for. We also on this property have intensive land management activities. It's really our main property where we do intensive land management. And so we had a massive invasive plant removal project in 2025. And we are looking to continue that up and just keep on removing the broom so that eventually it will stop coming back to the degree that it currently is. To that end, we have a volunteer program that will be starting up again in October to remove the French broom. And so that's always exciting to see that kind of happening, but to also get to show the public the property and teach them some stuff. In terms of other interesting aspects of the property, we have endangered species on the property. So we have, I think, 5 or 6 listed species. We also have a couple of easements. We have the Olympia Conservation Area, and we have the Meyer Preserve. And those are both kind of easements that are prevent us from doing certain things to help conserve the habitat for those species. So that's currently 7 acres approximately that is under easement. And in our current Sandhills Habitat Conservation Plan, which we're developing, we'll have another 40 acres added to that. And that will protect those species and help to offset the impacts of our operations and other Sandhills properties. The road that runs through this property also provides a key access to the ridgeline. And so there was a shaded fuel break done along the ridgeline by the RCV. And that provides a key break between Scotts Valley and Dianthe or Felton. So making sure that we're maintaining that road is vital so that the fuel break is actually beneficial for bikers to be able to get up there and use it. The same kind of management goals apply in terms of maintaining defensible space around infrastructure. We don't want our stuff to burn up. Protecting endangered species, managing recreational use, and also preventing trespass. We do get a good amount of trespass at this property. And if you could scroll down to the bottom, Scott. Yeah, this one. So you can kind of see our network of trails and roads is the fine line on there. We do have the bottom trail system is kind of in the Sandhills. And then as you go up, it gets kind of into redwoods and more forested areas with some good views at the top, I'll note. But yeah, so we have that network of trails and roads that are open to people for recreation. But we still get quite a lot of trespass into the kind of endangered species habitat. And so trying to prevent that trespass is something that we're very actively trying to work on. Let's see, what else do we got? Yeah, I feel like that is kind of the main aspects of that property. And then if you scroll up to the main map again, Scott, we have the Upper Dianthe property, which is in blue on the top right there. And this property is 182 acres. It has no water sources. We don't use it as a watershed property, really. But these Dianthe Creek does run directly down the middle of the property. And again, it's forested, steep, and rugged. We implemented a large woody debris project as restoration along with the city of Santa Cruz in a kind of partnership in 2019. And that project has been really successful. And that is on the far north end of the property. So that's always a cool spot to go and check out and see how the large wood is doing in the stream. In terms of some of the history of this property, it was clear cut in 1974, and the logging roads from that still exist. And so the interesting part with this property is that it provides an opportunity to harvest the timber again. And we took a site visit out there with a registered professional forester recently, and he deemed it as a valuable opportunity to get out there and manage the land, kind of reduce the fuel load, improve the health of the forest, and bring some money back to the district. So that's something that we're interested in pursuing, or at least looking into. His estimate is that we would get about 5,000 board feet per acre, which to me doesn't really mean anything. But overall, it would net us about 300,000 was his broad estimate. So that is kind of something that I can process at least and be like, okay, that seems good. And his proposal is that we would then go in for future harvests every like 12 to 14 years. And that would yield greater volumes because our first time would kind of thin the trees, and then the rest of the trees would be able to grow better. And so then future ones, we would get better volume from what we are harvesting. And so basically our main goals for this property, besides that timber harvest potential, is managing trespass and dumping. This is a more remote property. And so we do, and the road runs right through it. We have some just like roadside areas where people dump a lot of their trash, or people like to go hike because, you know, it is kind of remote. So again, managing trespass and dumping. The last piece I'll touch on, you can't really see them from this view, but there are some green small properties throughout. So we own a number of other properties that are just, you know, they house pump houses or tanks or wells, or some of them are just empty vacant parcels. Some of them are parcels we designate as surplus. But yeah, on these other properties, we do defensible space if we have infrastructure on the properties. We surplus and sell properties that we no longer need. And we also try to minimize liability. A lot of the liability comes from, you know, if it's a forested property and we're next to someone else's property, trying to make sure that we don't have trees that are, you know, going to fall down on their property and, you know, wreck their whatever, or harm them. So yeah, trying to keep an eye out for properties that are a potential liability, or, you know, things on the property that could. All right, that was a lot of me talking. So I will now hand it over to you guys for any questions or comments.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate that overview. So covering a lot of ground here, and I'm not sure, maybe was that a pun? Didn't even realize that. So we could just go around the horn if that sounds good. I don't know if we want to subdivide our questions. We could take maybe broad questions first and then go property by property, if that's helpful. I don't know how much questions or comments you all have. So maybe we'll just start, and you can go as deep as you like or as shallow as you like. And
a couple of them just came up when you were asking, such as you mentioned, I think it was the Olympia watershed was the only property right now where you're doing the intensive plant management. Is that just because of resources, or yeah?
Yeah, and it's also important because of the endangered species there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is really just focusing our resources where it does matter.
Cool. My next question was about, I know you had the forester go out and look at the property and, you know, give kind of a net income, that a number that might be beneficial. What are kind of the next steps there to like understanding the process and where you guys might move forward?
Right. So, I mean, if it's something that the board shows interest in, The next step would be to get a registered professional forester to essentially take the project on. So I'd probably be releasing a sort of RFP or RFQ
Yeah.
for that. And then that forester would essentially be the one that writes the timber harvest plan and kind of sees the project through, overseeing whoever the kind of contractor is that comes in to actually do the work.
And then I just had one note about the net total income. I don't know what he took or they took into an account with that, but I do see that it's a steelhead protected species, and so I assume there's going to be a lot of environmental controls and things that get quite costly. And so does that account for all of those?
Yeah, so I think like the biggest things are going to be creek crossings, and there are a few, but this was done previously. So if you are kind of developing new creek crossings, it's very, very
Your
costly.
grandfather
Uh,
kind of.
yeah, we would need to fix them up because they didn't do them quite up to code back in the day, but they're already somewhat established, and so it's lesser cost there. Yeah, this 300,000 estimate is all in, like considering everything. But again, I will note, uh, broad brush estimate.
Yeah. Cool. That was it for me.
I have one question. Do you fire management has any specific code for designing pipeline doesn't affect as hazardous next fire or
So designing a pipeline that isn't affected by fire. Yeah, so the option for that is you can use metal pipe, or you can what we use for a lot of our cross-country pipelines is this HDPE pipe, which is essentially a type of plastic, and that is what burns in the fire. So the option is either you can use metal pipe or you can bury it, the plastic pipe underground, but it's very costly to do that, and especially on our big red salmon colored property there. It is there's no vehicle access, and so it'd be all hand digging for it's like 7 miles of pipeline out there, so it's just not exactly feasible to do that. Yeah, so there are ways to do it, but it's just very expensive.
because I worked on the designing pipe for flat area, but the freezing point. We bear the pipe underground, for example, 4 feet or more than that one. But you say that is the expensive and very hard to do that.
Yeah. On a lot of most of our other pipes that are in, obviously we have pipes buried under the road, or we have pipes buried other places. It's just in certain scenarios, it's not exactly feasible. Like when we don't have vehicle access, so you can't get equipment up there to actually like make the trench to put the pipe in. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other comments on that, Jason.
No, I mean, I came from a district where we lived in the valley and everything that we did was underground, at least 3 feet, right? So, but when you're going up the side of a cliff, you put the pipe on the side of the cliff, you can't bury it then, so.
Yeah.
Plus, depending on the soil, I don't know what the soil's like up there, how sandy it is or anything like that, so.
Topography. Ups and downs.
The ups and downs.
But beside that difficulty from here, any codes available for this, not this area, any flat area or minimize the hazards from fire?
So you're saying, is there like another way that we could do the pipeline? I don't really believe so, because where we're collecting the water out in these really remote areas where you can't get vehicles to, and so the pipeline needs to run from there to the treatment plant. So it's still, yeah, it needs to run from these very remote places, and so there's no easy way to get the water. Yeah, on like a nice flat area, it's deep up in the mountains, so yeah, it's challenging.
if you dig the narrow river or something, water come to some area you can manage very well.
If we use rebar, you said?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so along the pipeline trail, we do use rebar in certain areas if you know, the pipe needs support or it's a really like steep section or
Yeah.
if the grade isn't right, we'll use rebar to make sure it's all at the right
When P-Vine is put
Great.
back into use, it will have pipe stands and pipe supports along the way
yeah, in areas where necessary.
where it drops down.
So you cannot protect from fire 100%, right?
No, yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
My recollection is that the cost estimate for the pipeline replacement that would be buried and protected from fire was about $60 million.
But that is work for lifetime or
It
temporary?
would be for a long time,
It'd
but
probably be for about 100 years, maybe, pipe on pipe.
That why you because of the cost you cannot do that?
yes, I think that exceeded all of our other projects combined.
60 million for 100 years, I don't think so. Anything.
The size of our capital improvement budget for the next, what, 2 years is
The next 3 years is 16, well, combined, it's about $30 million total
But
for everything.
but you can get the support from state or federal because they are right now they have a fire management.
yeah, we've definitely looked into it, but just that cost is prohibitive, I would say.
And even on something like that where the state is looking to do their grant monies, they're looking to do what is the biggest impact of the money, and they're not going to spend $60 million of their pot on that one project. There's not,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately.
And we have to pay for it first.
Doesn't
Get reimbursed.
doesn't make sense for me. Because you're doing one job for 100 years because of the 60 million you don't do that.
Right, but when was the last time that was burned up? When was the pipeline installed?
1989 or something,
That was when it was originally installed?
Mhm.
I believe, yeah.
Well, the HDP one. Before then, there was like older, like metal, like stovepipe
Mhm.
pipeline in the area.
And how long was that there without a fire?
I know that there was a fire in the area like early 1900s, so maybe then, but I'm not
So
sure.
about 80 years to 100 years, so you're getting the same amount of years in between fires, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
I know
the,
it's a gamble, but we're talking about putting the pipeline in for $1.5 million versus 60 million.
It's 1.5 million is all for the above.
I think that's when we're also, because we're doing it in-house, I think when it's all said and done, that'll be maybe what the cost is,
Isn't that
1.5 to $2 million.
I see.
Okay.
And the pipe was at a 1% grade. So there's no way you're gonna put in buried pipe at a 1% grade across that mountain.
Sure.
Because you don't want it scouring when it's coming to the treatment plant.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Mike?
Thank you for this report. It sheds a lot of light. Now I'm gonna rapid fire a bunch of questions because
go for it.
this gets me going. This is a lot of cool stuff. Really quickly on the Ben Lomond property, does the timber rights that Sempervirens holds, has that impacted any of the down or dead or hazard tree removal or any of that, or do we consult with them prior to, or how has that relationship worked? And if we were interested in removing more of that dead wood, has anybody contacted Sempervirens to see if they would be willing to allow that to occur?
yeah, so for instance, for our 5 mile project, the shade fuel break we have going on right now, we, you know, kind of floated it by them, you know, a year or two ago. And then we essentially got their approval to do the project. They are in an interesting position in that they are moving towards more active tree management.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think really they would be open to us doing any sort of more management of, you know, deadwood or just forest management in general. I think for a lot of the property, again, it's not exactly feasible. But yeah, I do think that doesn't necessarily limit us very much.
And I have a similar read. I think that that's probably an appropriate interpretation currently. And so I think if there is any projects that we have, I think they'd be a willing partner. Okay. Okay, can you give me a little background on when the district acquired the Upper Zayante property and what the intent was of acquiring that?
Yeah, so my basic understanding, which is secondhand from our forester, is that the property was purchased because there was supposedly going to be a dam and reservoir built up
Okay.
there. And so essentially, the city of Santa Cruz bought property all along there. The district bought property along there. City of Scotts Valley also bought like a little parcel along there because the more property that you had along there, the more water rights you had to the reservoir or something along those lines. However, that never happened. And so essentially now we just have this property that we don't use for much. Obviously it was harvested in 1974. Other than that, we have the restoration project along the stream, but we don't really use it for much else
Okay.
other than that.
Okay. You mentioned 1974 infrastructure on that property. Do we know, has any maintenance of any of that infrastructure occurred since then? Or are we looking at 50 plus years of infrastructure, culverts and things that have not been replaced?
Yeah, so we haven't done a deep dive. I'm not sure that there are really culverts.
Okay.
Because yeah, this was done before the forest practice rules went into effect. And so not sure on that, but we drove around the property. And it's like commingled with City of Santa Cruz property. They border and like
Mhm.
the roads kind of traverse between them. It seems like the roads are in decent shape. It doesn't seem like there would be a ton of work necessary. I think it would really be the free crossings.
Yeah.
Just figuring out how to get across those.
And that usually is the case. You mentioned the large wood project was successful. What does that mean? Is it fish return or just morphology, or how do you guys assess that?
Yeah, I mean, generally morphology. I obviously was not involved in the project when it went in, and we haven't really done specific monitoring on it, but just judging from site conditions, looking at the pictures from before versus now, it seems that it's been successful in kind of recruiting more wood, building those pools, and building salmon habitat.
You're doing great.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, a couple things I would like to see if that at least might be helpful for us. Like budget wise, let's just stick to the four main properties you guys are discussing. Like which I'm assuming Olympia is the larger piece of that pie. It'd be interesting to see like how much money the district is spending on these properties. Just percentage wise, I mean, maybe total cost is worth it, but I do know Sandhills is a unique animal with grants and everything because of the endangered species. So it's easier to acquire it. And then sometimes you have to do matching funds, but it would be interesting to gauge which properties are costing us the most money or which ones we're investing in more.
Yeah.
And one thing I also would like to see, I'm not going to tell the district about its goals, but we've got at least 3 properties. Probably all 4 of those are in a community, and as I would like to see not just maintenance of fuels and infrastructure associated with our own infrastructure for water purveyance, but also like we should be looking at what our fuels and infrastructure are doing for the surrounding community and houses and such.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we have houses, I think a priority should be, you know, just defensible space around the additional communities, not just our own infrastructure. And I think our community would want us to be looking at that as well. So if we do have fuel buildups that are in neighborhoods, I think it should be a priority for us to be examining what we can do to reduce that, and maybe partnering up with our communities or whatever else. But just part of being a good neighbor and looking a little bit outside of our own direct operations. And one other thing that might be worthwhile, just you guys did discuss the goals, and again, it was all great. Property liabilities. Are there anything about these properties that are, you did mention trespass and some of those things, but are there any other liabilities? Are there any other cleanup sites? Are there any other barriers that are maybe something that is going to have to get addressed, or something that's keeping us from moving forward? I know that's a little vague, but it's also really helpful for us to look at, especially as if we start coming up with answers and that's already listed in there as a barrier, then that's great. That's something that we need to be focusing on and looking forward to. But for the most part, I think this was really helpful, and I really appreciate you guys going through this process.
Yeah. And I'm curious, I know that you this is your bread and butter, kind of, it seems it's what you do for a living. I'm curious, other liabilities, like we've had, a couple of landslides on our properties long ago, that were liabilities, or, trees for neighboring properties is a liability.
Well, and I would even say providing like any properties that have easements going across that other people use to access their properties.
Right.
Technically, that is not necessarily, it's a hindrance, and it's also something you guys have to observe, and you have to mean, okay, this road can't be closed. We have to maintain this. This road's gonna have to be open. And then there might be bridges associated with that. Again, neighborhoods are important to recognize, power lines and anything that could impact management and could impact the direction of management moving forward. And I mean, you could include everything. So I would focus on what you guys think is important, but just for our sake, so we can look at something quick and say, oh yeah, okay, this is obviously identified as a problem. This is important. It's within our goals.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really interesting. That's maybe I'll just key off of that before going into some of my comments. I think that the liability management is a very important thing from a financial responsibility to the community of residents and ratepayers who will pay for any liability costs that the district incurs. At the same time, almost everything could conceivably pose a liability risk. And at the organization where I work, we own a bunch of land, and we've spent a lot of time with our council trying to understand, when does a potential issue become a real issue? And you might consider having those conversations so that you're well informed. For example, not to be a lawyer, but in what we've been advised on is that if there's a tree that a neighbor reports to us as looking to them like it could be a hazard for their property, then we have to look at it.
Yes.
But if no one ever calls it to our attention and we don't notice it, we're not necessarily expected to know the condition of every single tree on every single perimeter of every property we have. So anyway, but talking to your council would be very helpful.
Yeah, and that is like the one piece that we actively manage, at least on the environmental side, is the hazard trees. And so yeah, we have a reporting form on our website, and we go out and check any tree that someone reports as potentially hazardous to their property.
Terrific. I guess in terms of my feedback and suggestions, one would be to look closely at your goals for the properties and consider potentially overarching goals applying to all properties.
Yeah.
Liability management or risk management might be one of those. And I would encourage you to prioritize your goals, because otherwise you might be pulling a weed in a redwood forest instead of managing a bridge that's going to fall down. Not that you would actually do that, but having prioritized goals allows clarity throughout the team about what matters most. And
Yeah.
once the top priority ones get done, then you can work your way down.
I think that also helps with conflicting.
That's right. And some goals may conflict with one another. That's right. Along the lines of watershed protection and environmental protection, one potential goal that could be contemplated for some of these properties with riparian habitat is whether a goal around listed species or rare species is warranted. Steelhead trout, giant salamander, those are some of the organisms that are listed in those habitats. They may warrant consideration. Revenue generation, is that a goal? I would suggest it could be, and perhaps should be. Absent that goal, it may be difficult to justify a timber harvest. It's not like we would add the goal to justify the timber harvest, but if the district needs revenue, and of course the district needs revenue, having that as an express goal might help clarify for process participants.
Owning a piece of any of these properties can offset the cost of the other environmental impacts that we have. That'd be great.
Right. And maybe the goal gets framed as net neutral,
right?
Or, offsetting revenue to offset costs, or
right.
something along those lines.
Yeah.
I'm sure over the next 10 years, more than $300,000 is going to be spent taking care of these lands. And so it's not like we're making bank on any of this stuff. But revenue generation can become contentious when it comes to land stewardship because it may conflict with other goals. And so being explicit about that as a goal and where it appears alongside the other ones. And so, for example, if it's lower ranking than watershed protection and environmental stewardship, then great. You could generate revenue up until the point that you start to impinge on those goals.
Right.
And then you have a kind of clearly defined boundary.
Right.
On liability management and trespass, particularly, trespass is a real thorny thing. This is another place where conferring with your council may be advisable. California has a recreational use statute that protects landowners from people recreating on their property. But in order for that to apply, signing the property with permission to pass signs rather than no trespassing signs is what our council advised us. I'm not a lawyer, but what I'm getting at is that having a property that's closed and no trespassing has burden associated with it. Like, you're supposed to post the property, like the perimeter of the property. I think we've been advised that every 100 feet or 200 feet, we're supposed to have a no trespassing sign around the entire perimeter of the property, which itself is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so trying to articulate the purpose for managing trespass. Do you need to call it trespass? Obviously, if people are dumping vehicles and trash and stuff, that's trespass and needs to be managed. If someone's taking a walk, is that a big deal? If someone's on a bike, is it a big deal? If they're in the sandhills, sure. So picking your battles, I guess that's what I'm getting at, and having clear expectations for your team. I know that it can be very demoralizing for a land management team to have trespass and to fight that trespass, because it's very hard to win that fight. And so having realistic expectations around that, especially when it comes to people just walking across the street from their house and taking a hike. I will just mention that timber harvest is a primary strategy for watershed restoration. Interestingly, for those who might not know, the total max, the water quality plan for the San Lorenzo River when it comes to sediment, has identified one of the main sources is all of the old timber roads, all of the old culverts that were put in to low standard. And one of the most cost-effective ways to clean that stuff up is to go in and do another harvest when you have the heavy machinery in the woods that can get all of that fill out of the creek, do some restoration along the way, rehabilitate old road cuts that might be yielding a lot of sediment into the creek. So if you contemplate that further, I would encourage you to frame it as an overall strategy. I was a little curious. I don't know enough about the burn condition of the Peavine property. What's that one called again?
Ben Lomond Mountain.
Ben Lomond Mountain, and whether that would be suitable for timber production.
It's just tough because the accesses are so steep. And yeah, the access is like, you can't get very far off them because there aren't really like branching roads. I would love to because it is so stocked, but I don't know that with our current accesses, it is possible.
We have a property that had a similar situation and did a cable yarding, a skyline cable yarding, where they pulled logs out like a chairlift. And the steep canyons are actually well suited to that because you can string from ridge to ridge and have a lot of free clearance between them. The skyline yard that used to be in our community hasn't been here for a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, but there are a couple operators
Okay.
that are potentially able to do that. Your length of span is key. And yeah, so chairlift, I like that. But yeah, it's all possible. It does cost a bit. If you're doing salvage work after the fire, it's going to be a little maybe more cost effective. May want to evaluate how your forest is recovering. If you're looking at a lot of dead tops, we're seeing a lot of stems just breaking off and falling over, and which is actually creating more of a sediment problem because a lot of times if you would cut those roots, the sprouts would continue and would be holding more structure, root strength in the ground. And we're seeing in some cases where some of those things have really damaged roots and then the sail of the canopy is still just blowing over. It's not, there's so many different approaches and different views and different, like everything's a microclimate with that fire. And in some cases, everything's fine. And in some cases, everything's on the brink of disaster. So it really does depend on your situation, but there's an option to get through that. In the past, they've entertained helicopters. Extremely expensive. It's extremely loud for the neighbors. They've used it in the past. I don't know if I would recommend doing that. It's cool to see from a distance, but I'm past the point of cool things to see in my life. So, but there's options. There's options.
Yeah. So anyway, if you consult with a forester on the Zianti property, you might consider including a small subtask just to do a cursory review of that.
And if I might, there are adjacent timber properties against that Zianti property. And it's possible when they cycle back through on their next harvest, maybe throwing in an extra unit that's on the district property isn't difficult. But there is one question you are going to have to resolve, is that district property is zoned as a utility. And our county is very restrictive on which zonings you can actually do a timber harvest on. So I don't know if public utility is one of those zonings.
Right.
May need a discussion. It's not the end of the world, but I don't know that the district's going to want to rezone that to TP. Maybe it does if there's no actual utility that's going on that property. It's your call. I don't know, but that is.
Do you know if all of the parcel?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know. I
I'm
checked
pretty
a
sure
couple.
our forester said it was zoned where we could harvest, but I don't know.
It's possible. I haven't looked that deep into it. I just saw that it was zoned for public utility, and I don't even know if that is illegal. It could be totally cool with this county. I don't know.
Very interesting. Terrific. My next comment is about partnerships. It's really exciting that you partner with the RCD and CAL FIRE. Those entities are often seeking partners. They have a hard time working with private landowners because of private landowners.
Right.
And so being able to be a partner and provide a large expanse of land to a shaded fuel break or to a watershed restoration project for the RCD is the path of least resistance in many ways in building resilience in our community. And I would encourage you to maintain constant ongoing dialogue with those folks. The other is the County Office of Resilience Response and Recovery that has resources for this. And they can do a lot of the work for the district.
Yeah, and that's always great, especially like with these recent RCD projects. Like they really just take the reins, and we're obviously out there, you know, making sure everything is in line with our methodology and what we want to see out there. But having them kind of be the project managers obviously is very helpful when we have limited capacity.
Right. And then my last comment on this is something that come up a couple times tangentially in board meetings and may be worth considering is this idea of land divestiture, getting rid of your land. And what is, you know, the primary justification is to reduce cost, reduce liability. And those are worthy goals. I guess the risk is that the goals of the district may not be adequately sustained by whoever then owned and managed that land. Or there's no one willing and able to take the land from you. Insofar as you're working on management plans for your properties and things like that, you might consider having some consideration of those issues that provide some explanation for why the district holds each property, whether that is a long-term thing that's good for the district's goals, and whether there's any consideration of divestiture. My personal opinion on that is that I do not believe there is any entity out there who would be willing to take the land for free. There's certainly no one that I could imagine would want to buy any of the land. And then it's a question of whether you would need to pay someone to take the land. And fairly quickly, I think you get to a place where it's not cost effective. That's just my editorial on that. I don't know if you have other opinions.
I like the word divestiture. Divestiture sounds really good. I think it's that Upper Zayante property could potentially have some sale use. I mean, you have to look at it, see about that. But you know, even if you were concerned about meeting goals or having some type of say over what the future of it is, you could put a conservation easement on it, and then, but you are taking value out, right? And so, if you were to sell it, you know, I understand that it potentially, if you're looking at 300,000 for an income, you know, timberland value in the Santa Cruz Mountains, probably anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000. Maybe if really well stocked, you're looking at 10 to 20, but let's go low ball. You know, you could be looking at selling that property for $1 million to $1.5 million. And that's a lot of entries of 300,000 before you're starting to add up to that, right? Maybe that's 45 years of harvesting at 3 entries. And so it is worth having that conversation if you can test that market and see if there's buyers. But again, that's up to that's why I wanted to have this, so people at the board level can make those kind of decisions of divestiture. It's good. I'm going to use that now.
Right. Great. So that concludes my thoughts. Does anyone else have questions or follow-up? Or
I'm just really, really happy you guys went through this process, and I think it's informative to all of us. I think it's been a good conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the comments and questions. And yeah, even just going through the process has obviously been helpful for us. I am still going to make maps for the other properties. GIS is just not cooperating, but yeah, we're we'll keep fine tuning it and working on it.
And are you presenting this before the board as well?
I am not currently, but I think I could. Usually if I'm gonna take something, it's less informational and more like an action.
Yeah.
But I could take an informational item, so maybe once we get it more honed in, I'll consider it.
I mean, perhaps just as an approval by the board of objectives and goals on that property. I don't know. Do you think it would be worthwhile from the board to hear it, or you think it's just?
I think it's certainly educational and may help frame why the main interface that I've seen at the board level is related to specific projects on the lands, or why do we still own them? And so in terms of explaining that, that could be helpful.
Yeah.
Relative to other priorities, it may be lower priority.
Right.
Okay, terrific. Any more comments from staff on this item?
No.
All righty, great. Let's see here. So that was, now we go on to unfinished business. Members of the public?
Nobody.
Okay. Informational material. We have a link to the prior environmental committee meeting minutes. Any comments on the prior minutes? Okay. Perfect. And that leads us to adjournment.
Committee comments as well.
Committee comments. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So general comments from the committee, request of future agenda items. Anything you'd like to hear more about?
I have no idea right now.
No, last month I actually requested this and you guys turned this around really fast. And again, I'm really grateful for that. It really helped me really frame up a lot more of the management decisions. So again, thank you.
All righty, terrific. Now adjournment. All right. Thanks so much. Good to have you all
Thank
here
you.
today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.